You're listening to the Light Novel Podcast. Visit us online at lightnovelpodcast.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Light Novel Podcast. Tonight, we are talking about another isekai series, one of my personal favorites, and that being Overlord. This evening, we're going to be focusing on the first 3 volumes of the series, which also happens to make up the first season of the anime, so that's, I guess, kind of a tidy little way to do things. With me tonight, I have Flyz.
Splat, 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 splat.
I have Terrence.
I wish I had something witty to say, but all my emotions are gone.
Oh, jeez. And because we like to have some differing points of view, and nobody else on the podcast has read Overlord, we have a special guest tonight, and that is Mirage. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm 41 years old. I live in Germany, near Frankfurt. And yeah, I actually thought about applying when you first started the podcast, but I wasn't sure that I could make it on a weekly basis, which was the plan originally. So I refrained from applying at that time. And last week, Bio and Flyz were talking on the Discord that they didn't have enough members for the next one. So I offered to join, and here I am.
All right, well, welcome aboard. As far as I understand it, you've read like probably more Overlord than I have. You're kind of caught up, aren't you?
Almost. I think I'm up to volume 12.
Okay.
So that's the... volume 12.
Yeah, that's, I think, the second last. I think 13 was the last one.
13 is also out in French translation, but I haven't gotten to that yet.
All right, cool. All right, so like I said, we'll be focusing on volumes 1 to 3 tonight. So there will, of course, be spoilers, but if you have seen the first season of the anime or read those 3 books, you are good to go. If you want to avoid spoilers, then, you can at least listen to the first bit of the podcast where we go through all the various news. It's been a couple weeks since we recorded Shield Hero, and we actually have a couple of licenses that we can talk about tonight, which is pretty awesome. And, of course, a few other anime announcements, etc. So, without further ado, we will start with the news. First off, we have the announcement that High School Prodigies Have It Easy, Even in Another World, is getting a TV anime. This one, in Japan, there are 7 superhuman high schoolers who are world-class geniuses in various fields, ranging from governance to economics and beyond. On one fateful day, these 7 wind up in a plane accident and wake up only to find themselves in another world. Finding themselves in a foreign place where magic and beast people are real, they immediately proceed to panic. Or at least that's what would have happened if they were some run-of-the-mill students. If anything, these 7 are actually using their talents to do absolutely ludicrous things so they can go home. Let's take it easy, because if we really let loose, I'm pretty sure we'll end up destroying this world.
Okay.
So yeah, this one does have a manga. I'm sure you'll get to that, but it does have a manga, I think, from Yen Press. And it looks interesting. I have heard it compared to some other series. I'm not reading any of them, but there's a few other series that have this kind of different people from different backgrounds kind of brought together in another world. But yeah.
All right, cool. Anybody else have something they want to say about it?
I actually haven't heard anything about this one yet. I don't think it ever came up in the top 10 list you're doing, but it sounds a bit strange because it's at the one hand it sounds like it's 7 high schoolers, and on the other hand they seem to have world-shaking powers, and I'm not quite sure how that fits together.
Yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, I really don't know much of it all about this series. I haven't read the manga or anything, so. In any case, we'll move along. There's a whole bunch of like ongoing anime like renewals of series. ReZero has been announced that it is getting another season. Has anybody seen, like, have they actually come out and said how many episodes it's getting, or we just know it's getting more?
They haven't. They just announced it. They didn't tell us how long it is. But when the first season got first announced, the light novel illustrator, he drew like an illustration to celebrate the announcement, and it showed all the characters that would be featured in the season, which showed all the characters from the first 3 arcs. And he did it again for this one, and it looks like, from what I've read of the web novel, it's only showing characters that I've seen in arc 4. So I think the season might only adapt the 4th arc, but I'm not 100% sure.
So it might just be one core then, maybe.
The 4th arc, I think, is like the longest arc out of the entire series so far. So they might be able to...
Okay.
Because
I think it doesn't make much sense to just do one core for ReZero. There's enough material out for 2 at least. So the first season, I think, covered volumes 1 through 9 or 8.5, and they are, I think, at 19 now in Japan. So my guess is that they'll do 2.
What, they're gonna do 2 arcs?
Of course.
No, well, two cores at least, so like probably another 24 episodes.
Yeah.
So
I think,
and
yeah,
they
I think
9.
it covered.
Yeah,
it
and they
covered the
9
first
volumes,
8.
right?
Yeah, it covered the first 8, and then it covered the first 5 chapters of 9. So like, I'm guessing the first episode of the second season is going to be an hour long, like the first season was, and they're just going to wrap up whatever was left of volume 9, and then I think 6 volumes, which is how long arc 4 is plenty of stuff to spread out for 2 core, because the first season, it's pace. They kind of like cut out a lot of details and stuff, especially in the 3rd arc since it's so long. So I think it'd be good to have those extra episodes just to explore the one arc.
Well, I mean, now that it's kind of proven itself, right? Like, I mean, the first season was really popular. It's had 2 theatrical. Well, I guess the second theatrical is coming, and then like I mean, at this point, they can get away with adapting just one arc and stretching it out, because it's not like they're trying to cram as much possible like stuff as possible, right?
Yeah,
So.
but I'm still waiting for subtitles for those, though.
I'm sure it'll come eventually. In addition to that, if we're talking about other seasons, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime has already had a second season announced. I guess this one was stupid popular, because I think that's one of the fastest turnarounds I've heard of, like, we just finished a season and boom, guaranteed we're getting another season.
Goblin Slayer was also like that.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
Yeah.
but have they actually announced Goblin Slayer's getting a full second season? Because that's one of the news things I've got here, that it's getting another episode as a theatrical release, but it sounds like it's just kind of like an OVA.
I think it might just. I think it might just be like a short film.
Looks like a short movie.
Like maybe
Yeah.
like an hour long, maybe.
But I think a second season is also quite probable.
Oh, I think it's probable, but I don't think they've come out and said Goblin Slayer for sure is getting a second season. But, I mean, yeah, you're right, though. The series ended with them saying Goblin Slayer would return. So we knew we were going to get more, whether it be movies, whatever. So Slime is getting a second season already. I know, Flyz, you were talking about that you kind of felt like it started really strong, but the second half of it, the second core, was a little, pacing-wise, a little weird.
Yeah, because the first half of the series, when they adopted the first 2 books, like, they gave them a lot of episodes. Like, they covered the first book in 8 episodes, which is a lot of time to develop. And, like, it's... and they did a similar thing to the second arc. And then once they got to the second core, I was expecting them to just adapt book 3 and then end the show, but they like shoved books 3 and 4 into like 4 or like 3 episodes each, and I think they like just skipped the entire first half of the 4th book, and so like the pacing was really weird, and it started getting like a little dry. And then
And the
I think
interesting thing is that it probably would have worked with volumes 3 and 4. They cut out much of this journey of Rimuru to the city and the whole part with creating the golem, and in the end they had enough room to make a whole filler episode as the last one.
Yeah.
the filler episode wasn't even good. It was just
Yeah.
basically like a recap episode for a finale.
Yeah, like that's what I didn't get. I was like, you've got to have like the whole thing where, oh yeah, and I remade her golem and stuff. I was like, I'm watching that like the last episode, not the, episodes afterwards, but, sort of the last capping off the arc episode. And I was like, man, like you're just ending this with a couple of voiceovers? Like seriously? Like, I don't know. I just, I liked the series. I really did. But I'm kind of like with you, Flyz. I'm like, you had 2.5 episodes. You could have done more with this.
Actually, the second to last episode I liked. It wasn't in volume 4. I think it's probably from volume 5. I haven't read that yet. It's not out.
Apparently it's like I think it might be anime original or a side story or something, because the demon guy who like Shizu fights in that episode, he comes up in volume 5 and becomes an important character. So it's pretty like they could have ended the show just like that, because it would have set up perfectly for the second season.
I mean, I understand why they left out the battle at the end of volume 4, because it would have ended on a massive cliffhanger. But the filler and flashback were unnecessary.
Yeah, I haven't. I only own the first volume and I haven't read it yet. So
Okay,
it's on my backlog. It's on my backlog.
All right. Well, and as I also just mentioned, Goblin Slayer is getting an OVA. I've actually seen some people theorizing that this is going to be volume 5. That that's what it's going to adapt.
From the picture, it's very likely.
I just saw winter, and I know volume 5 has a lot of winter, like in the snow and shit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it takes place like up in like this snowy mountainous region. So, and it's very self-contained. Like it's actually, I mean, funny enough, it's like volume 5 of Konosuba, right? Which they're also adapting into a standalone movie. It's, it carries on the story of the characters, but it's still a fairly self-contained story that you could really just do as a one-off.
Yeah, mostly. It introduces a new character that I think has more appearances later, but it's not a really important character. So far, I have only read volume 6.
Yeah. Well, and again, like I think this seems to be. I mean, aside from, series that, they announced the next season right away, like Slime, I think this seems to be kind of a thing now where it's like, if they finish a core and then they've got only like, say, one book that's sort of self-contained before it starts into a new arc, this seems to be a thing now where it's like, we're getting a movie, right? Like they're even doing that with Rascal, Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai or whatever, that they're putting out a theatrical release to sort of bridge over a couple more volumes.
So far for Goblin Slayer, most of the volumes were pretty much self-contained. Volume 6 is as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is how Goblin Slayer will go for a while. Maybe that's what their plan is. They're going to see how this movie does, and then they'll just do sort of one-off extended episodes kind of thing to do a book, which, I mean, it's fine by me. In terms of another season, we got season 3 of my youth romantic comedy SNAFU, or as the light novel is called, My Youth Romantic Comedy Is Wrong As I Expected, which I'm guessing will finish the series, seeing as how the very last volume, I think, is coming out in April. It was pushed back, I think, to April.
Yeah, I would have to catch up with season 2 before that. I have only seen season 1. It was good,
Yeah.
but I haven't gotten the opportunity to watch it so far.
Yeah, I've fallen way behind in the light novels, which is actually not cool because I like the series. It's good, but so prepare for the wars to begin because some waifu is going to win.
Do you think so? Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
It's not a given.
I can't wait for the internet threads.
I mean, maybe the author will cheap out somehow and nobody will win, but you know, I think the fans might lynch someone if that happens.
When in doubt, it's the tsundere. It's always the
Yeah,
tsundere.
if he ends it like that, I'm throwing my Yukino figure out of the window.
No, he ends up with oh my god, what's the effeminate dude? That's who he ends up with.
Totsuka, best boy.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Well, like if you've read enough of the series to see it hit fucking Hachiman's monologues like he must be like somewhat bi because like no dude thinks these things without being a little bit bi.
Well, I mean, he certainly seems to be somewhat bi towards that particular character. That's for sure. Because yeah, there's a lot of times where he's like. He starts crossing some mental lines that you're like, this might just go a very interesting way. But in any case, so season 3 of that has been announced. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that'll cover the rest of the series. Then in terms of a couple of spin-off mangas, we'll just blow through these really quick. Infinite Dendrogram and... Also, funny enough, That Time I Was Reincarnated as a Slime are both getting spin-off manga, and both of them are dealing with these sort of really minor side characters. It looks like that you just don't know a whole lot about. So, I think they're just trying to extend the brand because they're doing well.
So, which side character?
In Dendrogram, I know it's going to be the pirate and that Dark Angel character that fought each other at the tournament in Volume 3. But the other one I don't know.
Is it not Gopta? He deserves his own spin-off.
He does, but and honestly, if that's what the spinoff was, I probably would have paid more attention to it. But it's like it's some other female character from some kingdom or other. Like it wasn't a character that has been introduced in the anime. I know that much because I was like, I don't know who this girl is, and I've only read the first volume, but I did watch the whole season, the whole series, and yeah. So I don't know who the character is, honestly. Maybe somebody who's up to date with that one could inform us in the comments. I don't know, but so anyway, yeah, so those both are getting spin-off manga. Like I said, I think it's just because both of them are doing really well, so they're kind of extending the brand out a bit. So now we get into the really meaty part of the news, which is we got several light novel licenses announced since we last talked. We'll start first off with a couple of things from Vertical. First off, they got, well, this one isn't a light novel, but it's definitely based on a light novel series. They have licensed the Bakemonogatari manga. So that one we're going to get in English, which I think there's only like 3 volumes so far, so they jumped on that one pretty quick. They are also bringing out the sequel to Seraph of the End, Guren Ichinose Catastrophe at 16, which is Seraph of the End, Guren Ichinose Resurrection at 19. So this one is continuing the prequel series story to the Seraph of the End manga, which of course also got its own anime. It is written by the author of the manga series, so it's completely legit and official. And in fact, I think for this one, they're using a different artist, but for Guren Ichinose Catastrophe, the first part of this, it was the same artist as the manga that did the artwork for the light novels as well. So it was like a whole package.
I think, I don't remember, but I think in the afterwards of one of the Guren 16 volumes, the author pretty much mentions that the manga series and the light novel series are meant to like be read hand in hand because they spoil some things for each other.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Especially near the end of 16. And
Yes. I'm pretty sure. Like, admittedly, I have not read the manga. I have only read the light novels, which is
I think you said you wanted to read the manga, but that was like years ago.
I know, and you know, that's and because I really like the light novels. Like, the light novels were pretty cool, and you know, that kind of made me go, man, I should read the manga. And then but that was back when I was kind of doing a little bit of manga and light novels, and then all of a sudden 8,000 light novels all got released, and so I just became light novel focused. So it just never happened, but still. So they got that. I you know, I don't want to gloat, but I did kind of predict that was going to happen when they announced the license of the last volume of Catastrophe. I was like, well, the only reason they're going to license that is if they get 19 as well. So anyway, so they got that one. And then they also got, I didn't even write it down, but it's a light novel version of a anime that was done many, many years ago, which is Voices of a Distant Star.
That's a Makoto Shinkai movie, I think.
It was a one-man project. I think it's about 30 or 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. It's all about, if I recall, and I mean, it's been, like I said, it's been years since I watched it, but it was basically about two sort of friends or whatever. The one remains on Earth and the other goes off to a space battle. And of course, they're traveling at the speed of light. So it's kind of how their messages arrive so many years apart because of the time differential with the whole light speed and everything, and you know how the one person's growing and becoming an adult and everything else while the other basically remains the same age because they're not being affected because of the the speed that they're traveling at. And it was kind of an interesting concept, if I recall. I should actually go back and see if I can find it.
It was quite impressive because it was only one guy doing it, but seen as a whole, it was more artistic.
Yeah,
it might have been Shinkai's first film.
Yeah, I think it was.
I think it was
because it came out really early 2000s.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I'd have to double check it, but yeah, I mean definitely it was his first. I mean that's basically how he broke on the scene. I can't remember. It was what? It took him like 3 years or something like to do it. I can't remember. I remember like when it came out, everybody was just absolutely flabbergasted because not only was it, you know, fairly artistic and the story had a bit of depth to it, but then it was like this one guy did it all himself. It was pretty wild. So that's apparently this is a novelization. Now I don't think it's written by him. I believe it's just somebody who has written it based on the screenplay. But I don't know very much about that one, I'm afraid. The big news, though, and the one that everybody was kind of like, well, it's about damn time, but at the same time, we were all surprised because it seemed like it would never happen. Vertical finally announced that they have licensed the 3rd volume of the Zaregoto series.
I can name a few podcast members that are happy about that.
Well, I would be one.
I've got 2 of the volumes sitting on my shelf just to support it, and now that there's a 3rd one, I'll actually pick them up and start reading them.
I think I've had volume 1 for a year and a half now, untouched.
Well, I mean, I'm not one to judge. I've probably got 10 volumes sitting on my desk that I haven't read, and they've been sitting there for a year. But you know what? This one, of course, Nishio Ishin, same author as the Monogatari series. And it's a sort of detective mystery, murder mystery type series. Like I say, sort of, like there is definitely a murder mystery element, but of course it's told by Nishio Ishin, which means it's not exactly a standard murder mystery by any means. You have some very obviously odd and weird characters, lots of dialogue, lots of sort of inner monologue. But still, you know what? I liked the first 2. In my opinion, the second one was actually way better than the first one. just because it had some kind of cool twists to it. Now, what makes this a little bit more significant is that many years ago, Del Rey, when back in sort of the first wave of light novels coming over, Del Rey brought out the first 2 volumes of Zaregoto, and when Vertical licensed them, they basically took the Del Rey books and then just cleaned up the translation and stuff like that. So Vertical releasing Zaregoto 3, this is the first time that this volume has ever been officially released in English. So it's the first actual 100% Vertical has licensed this book, and they're the first ones ever to license it in English. So it's kind of cool. Hopefully that bodes well, because like I said, I've liked the series too, so I'd like to have more of it as well.
I did see some people kind of like, oh, they said it's popular now, like, and they're wondering if is it actually selling super well, or is it popular because everybody on Twitter who is a fan of it is demanding that they get Zaregoto 3.
Well, I remember like Sean Gaffney was something like, what did he say? He was like, he says, I wonder if every single time somebody like, he's like, if it was like a drinking game, every single time somebody asked for Zaregoto, if they did a drinking game at Vertical, people would be dead. Or I can't remember. Like, it was something really, he made this very snarky comment about how, like, no matter what Vertical ever announces, the only thing they ever hear back is more Zaregoto. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, apparently more Boogie Pop is going to be the new thing.
Well, I mean, Boogie Pop's got over 20 volumes in Japan, and like, whoop-de-doo, you've licensed 6. But anyway,
the one thing intimidating about Boogie Pop is that I already have a tough time keeping up with series when they release 1 volume every 3 or 4 months, but they released a 3-in-1, and then I was expecting a longer wait between 1 through 3 and 4 through 6. So now there's 6 volumes out already. I haven't even started the first one, and I'm like, oh, geez.
Well, and like, honestly, I mean, I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? Like, I'm not complaining, but like, I looked at Omnibus and I was like, man, I think I'll just buy the ebooks, because seriously, I think I'd get like wrist strain trying to hold that thing. Like, it was big. I can't even imagine the guys who bought that whole, like, you've got the Spice and Wolf one, right, Flyz? That has like 17 volumes or something?
Yeah, but that one's like it's more of like a collector's edition. But it's funny because it says the complete collection, but then right after it released, he started writing more volumes for the main series. So now it's not the complete collection anymore.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that was kind of funny. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, it's not meant really to read. I just call it the Bible and I leave it on my shelf to look at.
Nice. All right, and then finally we got 4 announcements from J Novel Club. The 4th one was a surprise, because we were told there was only going to be 3, and what the 4th one is an even kind of bigger surprise, and we'll talk about that. The first 3 that they brought out, all 3 of these have been on the top 10 regularly, so they're all good sellers in Japan. First one is The Greatest Magicmaster's Retirement Plan. I'm still not sold on the whole Magicmaster term, but anyway. In a world where the fiends run rampant, every other translation I've ever said says demons, but it's close enough. Magicmaster Alice Reagan, the young prodigy that has defeated more fiends and reclaimed more of humanity's lost territory than anyone else alive, requests retirement from military service at the age of 16. But due to the twists and turns of fate surrounding his status as the #1 magic master in the nation, the top magic master out of more than 100,000, he ends up as a student at a special magical institute, hiding his identity and training his successors, a pair of beautiful magic master girls, not to mention continuing to defeat fiends in secret. Get ready, the epic adventure of the greatest magic master Alice Reagan begins now. So yeah, that's that one. I kind of actually think I preferred the fan translations of the synopsis before.
Yeah, I think when you talked about this one before, his retirement plan was supposed to be wiping out the demons. Now it sounds like his retirement plan is to train his successors. Or maybe it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, well, I think... Yeah, well, I think that's it. Yeah, I mean, I was only going by what other people told me because, of course, I can't read anything in Japanese. But yeah, right. Like based on this description, it certainly makes it sound more like it's him trying to make the next generation better than him, so that he doesn't look good anymore, so he can retire. As opposed to
maybe they just wanted to advertise the cute girls. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Like, really, that's not a light novel unless there's some cute girls, and I'm sure they fall in love with him, and there's a harem, but anyway, yeah. The next one that they announced is Campfire Cooking in Another World with My Absurd Skill. Mukoda Tsuyoshi was nothing special in modern Japan, so when he was summoned to a world of swordplay and sorcery, he thought he was ready for the adventure of a lifetime. Too bad the kingdom that summoned him only got him by mistake. Not only was he not one of the 3 summoned heroes, but his stats were laughable compared to theirs. On top of that, there's something really sketchy about this kingdom. These people are the kind to try and use the hero, he realized, and immediately left to make his own way in this other world. The only thing Mukoda can rely on is his skill, the online supermarket. A skill that allows him to buy modern goods in a fantasy world. It's useless for combat, but if he plays his cards right, he could lead a comfortable life. Maybe? At least, that's what Mukoda thinks. But it turns out modern food bought with his skill has some absurd effects. What happens when Mukoda introduces ridiculously tasty modern cooking to a fantasy world like this? He gets some ridiculous repeat customers begging for more. So yeah, this one, like I said, this one's shown up a bunch of times in the top 10. As far as I understand it, I was talking to somebody else, and they made it sound like it's a lot more of like a almost slice of life. Like the way they described it, it made it sound kind of like I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level. Like it's not really got a big, huge storyline. It's more just about this guy living his day-to-day life and the crazy, kooky people that hang out with him because of what he can do. That's kind of the gist I got from people.
Didn't you guess this one, Justice?
Oh yeah, because they said the hint was something like all the free shipping will be worth it or something like that, and I was like, oh, I bet that it's this one. I'm like, it's the only one that I can think of that would make sense because the whole online supermarket and. Yeah, that's the first time ever in all of J Novel Club's hints that I actually guessed one. Well, except for the third one that I'm going to talk about. But I mean, that was either like a ridiculously obvious and easy one, or I know Sean Gaffney put it out there. He was like, did anybody stop to think that maybe Sam just did this to really mess with all of you?
I thought it was going to be a troll. I thought it would be like Library War or some other book that has books in it.
Yeah. See, I mean, that was totally possible. But as it turns out, it was the title that the majority of us thought it would be, which was Ascendance of a Bookworm. Which we have talked about a number of times on previous podcasts. In fact, also the fact that J Novel Club licensed the manga some time ago. A certain college girl who's loved books ever since she was a little girl dies in an accident and is reborn in another world she knows nothing about. She is now Mine, the sickly 5-year-old daughter of a poor soldier. To make things worse, the world she's been reborn in has a very low literacy rate, and books mostly don't exist. She'd have to pay an enormous amount of money to buy one. Mine resolves herself. If there aren't any books, she'll just have to make them. Her goal is to become a librarian. This story begins with her quest to make books so she can live surrounded by them. Dive into this biblio-fantasy written for book lovers and bookworms.
So that's the mine they were talking about in the Discord, because I thought they were talking about the mine from Abel Average.
No, yeah. This series, I mean, this one has topped the Tonkobon list for Kono light novel Gasugoi for the last 2 years. It is getting an anime adaptation. I think on the last podcast that had just started to come out, the news about it, and we weren't sure if it was like 100% legit yet. Which, of course, now that we're sitting here a couple weeks later, it is absolutely true. In fact, there's already a PV out of it. So you know what? I mean, this one, I think, definitely all the fans were screaming for it. But I think this is a huge catch for J-Novel Club and kind of shows how J-Novel Club has really, risen the ranks in terms of their ability to license A-class titles, because like I said, I mean, you take a look at who's grabbed the top Kono light novel Gasugoi titles over the past couple of years. It's always been Yen, and now J-Novel Club is snatching them up and has got this one, which I don't know. I mean, part of me kind of wonders how huge it'll be, just because it seems to be a little niche, but at the same time, everybody I've seen who's read it just says it's awesome. So I'm very excited to check this one out.
Oh, I think somebody found the manga version also maybe on Amazon right now. So physical editions of the manga, I think, might be happening. But don't quote me on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't tried to data mine any of that kind of stuff, but and I mean, Sam, as far as I understand it, he did say all of these were just digital releases at this time.
Yeah, there's definitely been some manga. Trying to remember if Animeta, is that the name of one of the mangas they have? That one is a physical release that you can buy on Amazon. But obviously it's not out yet.
Yeah. Well, I think to an extent, manga are still a safer bet in terms of doing physical print releases than light novels. So I can see where maybe Sam would be more willing to take a risk on publishing a manga as opposed to a light novel series. Plus, I mean, I don't know how long that manga is. I mean, Ascendance of a Bookworm, I think there's something like 18 volumes or something at this point. And as far as I understand it, they're pretty long. Like, I think somebody was saying it was on par with like the saga of Tanya the Evil. I'm pretty sure. So I can see where maybe Sam will wait to see what the sales are like on this one before dedicating himself to a print release. Finally, and like I said, this was kind of a bonus one because none of us expected a fourth. And it was really funny because I remember just sitting there on Twitter and like watching and then Sam's like, and another thing. And we were all like, what? And so he comes out with, they have licensed Full Metal Panic. Sagara Sosuke isn't your typical high school student. He reads military enthusiast magazines. He responds to questions with affirmative. He brings grenades to school in his bag. Though everyone at school takes him for a hopeless military geek, Chidori Kaname thinks there might be something more to him. When their plane is hijacked in the middle of a field trip, Kaname's instincts will prove correct. Sosuke is an elite mech piloting mercenary, and he's here to protect her. So, a couple of things about this which are very interesting. First of all, yes, a classic series. So a series back from the early 2000s, but it might even be like it might have started even late 1990s. I should have looked that up, but I know it's an older series. But well, also it's mecha, which is awesome because I've been screaming for mecha light novels for I don't know how long now. And also, but this is the big part, this was actually a Tokyo Pop license many years ago before Tokyo Pop bombed internationally. As far as I understand, they've somewhat survived in Europe over the years, but they let this license drop. So this is actually a license rescue by J Novel Club. It's the first one, as far as I know, that they have done. And it's going to be very interesting because Sam did really heavily hint that if this one does well, they may look at other rescues down the road. Although he did say, if I recall, he said that it was not easy to get this one.
Yeah, he also said if it does well, we might get the sequel and the spin-off series. Obviously, it's going to have to do well to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, so this one, I mean, like I said, I mean, yes, it struck a couple notes for me because I remember this from sort of the heyday. Like they just came out with a new Full Metal Panic anime, but the first one that they actually did was back, the heyday where we had like ADV and all of those kind of companies out in like the early 2000s and stuff like that. So this was actually like, in that sort of early big like license boom that we had. So, I mean, I remember watching it way back when on VHS. And then, so it's kind of cool to me that we're getting an older series, but also a mecha series. And like I said, a rescue, which is kind of cool because, man, Tokyo Pop had a couple of really awesome older series that if this one does well, I would love to see get rescued.
Yeah, it's probably too much to hope for Aria.
What Aria the Scarlet Ammo?
But I think that's about
I mean,
25 volumes or more.
My God!
I'm
yes,
surprised I'm surprised they haven't
die.
even tried because like every time a new volume comes out, it makes it to the top 10.
Oh yeah. Every time.
Still not sure if J Novel would pick that one up.
Well, but that one's kind of weird because it's also more recent because I believe Digital Manga licensed it somehow, but their license, like, I remember Sam saying to us way back when that the average license was between 5 to 10 years, depending on the length of the series and a whole bunch of variables that are probably above me and beyond me. But in any case, Digital Manga, I think, put the first volume out of Aria just about 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't even know if this could be rescued at this point because I know Tokyo Pop kind of went boom around 2008 or so. So, I mean, it's been, 10 years basically since that whole thing kind of imploded. So I think that's maybe why this is still was a possibility to get. So I don't know about Aria, but I do agree. Like I'm surprised that somebody hasn't tried to do something about that. Cause man, that series, Japan, it's ridiculous. Like the series won't die. And every time a new volume comes out, it's top 10 easy. So
yeah, I think the first 2 light novel volumes, they're still on sale on Amazon digitally.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, you hope somebody else can somehow grab it, so they keep going.
I know. Well, it's been like, I think something like 4 years since they put out volume 2. So clearly volume 3 is not happening as far as I know, but
I think I pulled the anime DVD from a bargain bin back in the day just because it was cheap and I was so pleasantly surprised that it didn't go as deep into the fan service as the blurb and the back suggested. And at the end, I just wanted to know how it continues, how the story goes on. And yeah, no chance.
Yeah, I don't even know how much the anime covered in terms of the volumes of that.
What sucks is that a lot of these series, I'm sure, had fan translations, and then when a series gets licensed, those fan translations usually get deleted. But when you have a situation where they only released 2 volumes and then completely booked it, so now there's still only 2 volumes in existence, and the fan translations are already gone. So you're kind of shit out of luck here if you wanted to read more. But I'm hoping Full Metal Panic does a good job, and that leads to more rescues, because I have a couple series that that need some rescuing. Like I have the first volume of Go Sick, which I think was a Tokyo Pop release, and I really liked the light novel version. And I think I think volume 2 is out, but I think the cheapest I found it somewhere was like for like $100, which is not as not worth one book.
No.
And then I have the first 2 volumes of Shauna on my shelf, but I've been very hesitant to even start it, because it's a Viz light novel release, and I'm pretty sure I was told that they censored a whole bunch of stuff in the volumes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why, but like that really demotivates me to even like start them. So hopefully,
no kidding.
They might rescue those too.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, there was a whole bunch of titles that Tokyo Pop had. So, I mean, like I said, it's been almost, you're looking at 10 years for some of these since they were last released. So the possibility of rescue, I guess, is a little higher. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, if you're listening to the podcast, definitely support Full Metal Panic if it piques your interest even just a little bit, because it could open some really great doors for some older series to sort of come back to life. So, all right. Speaking of dead things coming back to life, check that segue out. Talking about the living undead. All right, so we will talk a bit about the light novel series Overlord. This one written by Kugane Maruyama. It is released in English by Yen On. In some, actually, I mean, it sucks for my wallet, but they are really beautiful hardcover editions. I have to give them credit. It's quite nice books, actually. This one is another sort of isekai in a game world, but not quite a game world type series. This one is about a man who is playing I guess they never come right out and say it, but I mean, it seems to be, it's obviously a VR MMO type game, sort of a la Sword Art or what have you. But in his case, what he and his guild had in common was that as opposed to playing as heroic characters, they chose to play as monsters. And the main character is a undead lich, magic using undead. And in any case, the game has been going for quite some years, and the company has finally said that they're going to shut the servers down for good. And so this main character of ours decides that he is going to remain logged in until the servers are shut down, and he is forcibly logged out. But the problem is that when that happens, he's not logged out. In fact, what he finds is that not only has he truly become an undead lich, and not only is he now actually in a world very similar, different in some ways, but similar to the game world that he used to play in, but he also discovers that all of the NPCs that he and his guildmates had created are now living beings with the personalities that they were programmed with by their creators. And so the series follows this character who eventually adopts the name of Ainz Olgon. It follows him basically like at the point where we are and going to cover tonight, of him trying to sort of find out what this world is like and to kind of explore the world a bit to see what dangers there are. But it's also him trying to find out, did other players such as himself end up in this world? And just what exactly is this world? What dangers are there? And what can he do to make a life for himself in this world? So the first volume, of course, is a big introduction to this whole thing, sort of deals with that whole thing. And what I really like about this series, the way that it starts, is that Ainz, when it opens up, he is all alone in this guild hall. So basically, they call it the Tomb of Nazareth. And basically, it's the guild hall that he and his guild created. And you get the idea that this game's been going on for a very, very long time, and that a number of the guild members have sort of left and aren't playing anymore. And so he's basically the last of his guild that is there, and one of them logs in to say sort of goodbye but doesn't hang around. So that's why when the game sort of becomes not a game, he is all by himself aside from the NPCs. But I really like that whole idea of they talk about how much the game meant to him and having that companionship. And, I kind of, maybe because like the character's a bit older, he's a salaryman. That's kind of the impression that we get, that, he talks about how he has a boss and everything else. And maybe I kind of just, as a guy who's in his 40s, I kind of was like, I relate to this guy having a video game as an escape from his mundane life.
Yeah, it's kind of an escape, but it's also kind of a place that these guild members can kind of come to and be like, oh, this is what I'm dealing with in my reality. Can you listen to me for a few seconds?
Yeah, you do get that idea that like they're all like they used it as a sounding board for one another, that the guild was not just monsters, but it was a lot of sort of people that were in a similar sort of space in their life at the same time.
And like they don't go into too much detail about all the other guild members, but they like throughout the first 3 volumes they give like little snippets of like what some of the other creators' lives were like. Like I think it was Perovincino, who's the one who created Shaltir. He's kind of just a huge pervert, and like you learn that like his like he would always talk about like the lewd stuff, but like he hated I forget what he hated, but I think his sister was like a voice actress.
Yes.
And she voice acted in a hentai, I think, and now he can't get her voice out of his head or something.
Yeah, yes.
So like they have like though they're not like in the actual story, you have like a lot of like weird characters that like you kind of wish they like would show up eventually.
The probability
if,
of
like,
that is
doesn't
quite
seem
low,
likely.
I think, because no one of them was there when the servers shut down. But throughout the series, you get the feeling that Momonga, or Eins as he's later called, he probably didn't have any friends other than those in the guild. No real life friends. Or at least very few.
Mirage,
Well, yeah.
you're really caught up to the series more than us. Is there any evidence at all like why he somehow got in this world? Because like I know like other isekai series, they kind of like hint at like why they're in the other world, but I don't think Overlord. Oh, he just kind of appears there.
No, there's
for some reason.
absolutely nothing so far. I don't think that's much of a spoiler because so the way the story is going, it's pretty obvious. There are some hints in the first volume that there have been other players in the past. When Eins fights against the Sunlight Scripture at the end of the volume 1, they are talking about the six great gods who founded this theocracy, and it's pretty much hinted that those have been players, but they came to that world 600 years ago, so none of them are probably still alive.
Yeah, you really do get that impression, like you were saying, that Eins didn't have much of anyone else. Like, he's one of those light novel protagonists that doesn't talk about his life outside of what he's currently in, except to talk about how he can make use of it. So like when he's trying to be the leader of these NPCs and how do I inspire them? How do I appear to be sort of like knowledgeable and stuff? And that's when he falls back on kind of his old life experiences. But you're right, like really outside of that, the only thing that he mourns is his teammates, his guild mates. Like those seem to be the only people that he really misses.
Yeah, and all
like he never talks about family or anything else.
Yeah, I think he even mentioned. I think he mentioned his parents were deceased. I don't know if they've gone into that
Oh, geez.
anymore,
Yep,
but
this is an anime,
I think
alright.
his parents are deceased, so I don't think he has any relatives, and then obviously he doesn't have any friends in the real world. He specifically said, "I don't have any real
Yeah.
world friends. It's just
And
his
everything he
guildmates
says
online."
about the real world is work related. There's nothing about his private life except when it's related to the game.
And which presents you again, like with that whole idea of the game was his escape, like it was where he tried to go to have that release from the whole, day-to-day grind. And I was gonna say, like, Kyle, you're Flyz, you're right. Like in terms of the other guild members, we learn a lot about them even just from the behavior of the NPCs that they created. Like that's the other thing that I kind of find is funny, like how the NPCs behave and how they talk about the creator and stuff. That alone tells you a lot about who those characters were and what kind of people they were.
Yeah, even like Shaltair was made by that huge pervert, and it's basically like a lolly from like one of his hentai that he watched.
Yeah, what I find funny is that every last one of that guild spent the time to make a detailed personality for their NPCs. I would have expected at least half of them to make a short description like, yeah, she's cute, finished.
Well, I mean, you get that idea that I think you kind of get the impression that they were all sort of in the same boat as Ainz, that the game was really everything, like aside from their work, the game was a good chunk of who they were away from work. And so that investment in trying to make it as real as possible. I also get
a pure role-playing guild.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think you get the impression too. I get the impression at least. I get the impression that there was, even though they were comrades and even though they seemed to be good friends, I think there was a little bit of competition too. Like you kind of get the idea that there was sort of that like, well, I made my NPC even hotter than your NPC. Well, my NPC, look, I spent like 15 hours writing out her personality, like I think there was a little bit of that too.
I've made not one trap, but two.
Yeah.
I loved how some of the guilds too, he talked about how they allot, abilities or like levels that you can assign to NPCs if you have a guild. He was talking about how there was like a cat lovers guild, and all their NPCs were just like cats that were like level 1. They didn't care. I just want 400 cats,
And I think at one point, Momonga mentions that in his own character build, he has taken a few classes that are not for optimizing his combat potential, but for role-playing reasons.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Dendrogram. Like, I don't want to say it's exactly like Dendrogram, but just in terms of, I think even the developers are said to say there's a lot of possibility in that world. Obviously, there's a lot of the world items, and they talk about how, some saw it as like game breaking or balance breaking, but then the developers were kind of like, oh, it's just, there's a lot of potential or possibilities with these kind of items. And then obviously they add in the creators tool, and you get the sense that there's a lot you can do in this world. In addition to, leveling and abilities and even classes people don't know about that you can acquire and nobody knows how to get them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like it seems like the amount of freedom that was available in the game was really vast. Like, even Nazareth, when you start getting into later volumes and you get a little bit more description of what all Nazareth has and how it's constructed and the different levels and everything else, like clearly the amount of freedom that these characters were afforded to be able to design this game was just crazy. So you're right. In a lot of ways, it is kind of like Dendrogram in that regard, that it really did allow the player to have a lot of freedom to decide who they were going to be, what they were going to do, and how they were going to do it. when we were first introducing this thing, like Flyz said splat, 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 and that's like, I will say, like, that's one of the things that when I read the first volume of this one, that was the first thing that kind of struck me. Not so much that it was going to become super gory, it does, but whatever. but this one, it is considered like a tankobon in Japan. It is sort of aimed at a slightly older audience, which you get that. I got that impression with this one right away, aside from just the fact that Ainz is obviously a bit older as a main character. Just even the storytelling itself seemed a little bit more mature and demanding that you be a little bit more engaged with it.
I think by the end of volume 2, like, I felt even a little bit more towards that than volume 1, because volume 1, he's like, oh, I don't care about those villagers, but then he's like, oh, I'm a little, he gets a little altruistic. He's like, oh, I gotta do good by, what my guild members told me before, to help out the less fortunate or whatever. So you can kind of get the sense that it's like, oh, they're evil, but then by volume 2, you hear about them torturing some of their captives, and then just the ultra display of violence. And then by volume 3, he's taking out, a whole party that is they just badmouthed him. And he's like, okay, no, you're gone.
Yeah, you see a very quick sort of descent of Ainz's character. Like, that is something that it was something that you get more in the first, like, I would say 1 or 2 volumes. Still, like, it lingers beyond, but that whole, like, sort of conflict he has between his human, who he was as a human, and the fact that as an undead lich, his emotions are suppressed, and like that sort of conflict that he has between the man that I was and the person that I am now. It seemed like that conflict existed a bit more initially.
Yeah, I like. I just liked how. So initially, this felt more like, there is still definitely that conflict of, I'm human in this other world. I kind of have to fake my way through it, but it's not quite as much as some of these other series where someone gets transported to another world and they become the demon lord, and then they're like, okay, I have to take on a totally fake personality to get through this. It's more like he has that in him, like he can be the demon, or he can be the overlord for them, but it's not like the way it is. Like, he's got this like thing, intrinsic thing in him that allows him to sort of suppress emotions. So it's not like he's faking it entirely, like just like, okay, I'm just going to be another entire different personality. He has that in him, that ability.
It's probably not an ability, it's a side effect of being undead. It's not like he has control over it. I think the last few days I reread volume 2, and in several places I noticed that it's more of a plot device, really. In some places he's, oh yes, every strong emotion is suppressed because I'm undead, and a few pages after that, oh, this emotion wasn't strong enough to be suppressed, so it's still there.
Yeah, I did want to ask about that. Like, he says strong and weak emotions, but like, to me it's like, is it strong in that it's like a strong, I don't know how to describe that, but like, is it strong in that it's like a strong virtuous? It does sound like it's more strong in like the amount of like pain it would give you, in terms of like mental energy or whatever. If it's like, super anxiety or whatever, he suppresses that.
To me it felt more like, it's, if the emotion is one that the author wants Ainz to have, it's not strong enough to be suppressed. And if it's one that is too strong, that he doesn't want him to have, then it is suppressed. There's no real,
but doesn't
no
he-
real direction, no real rules to this.
Yeah, you're right. It does seem sometimes to be well, but Ainz himself, doesn't he even say so at one point? I'm trying to think of whether it was in the first 3 volumes, but even he sort of comments at times. He's kind of like, well, what the hell? Like sometimes my emotions get suppressed, and then other times,
He
like
comments
why?
that all the time.
Yeah, he's like, why the hell am I dealing with this garbage right now? Like, I don't want to feel this. Why am I having to deal with it now? And yet all this other stuff was suppressed, no problem. Yeah, I agree with Mirage. It seems to be a bit haphazard. Like, I don't think there really is a consistency. I think the author tries to imply like it. I got the impression the author was trying to imply that it was the intensity with which Ainz felt that particular emotion at that moment. So it wasn't like, oh, he will always feel love because it's intense. Well, no. If he felt an intense love towards someone, then he might feel that. But it doesn't mean that love is always going to be an emotion that gets through. That was kind of how I got the
It's
interpretation, but even
the way
that,
they say it in the novel, it's the other way around. Intense emotions are the ones that are suppressed, and
Yeah.
low-key emotions are the ones that are not.
Yeah, that's why it's so confusing. It's like you would think, okay, I can understand that it would go after an intense emotion, but you would think that weak emotions just wouldn't get through at all. But yeah, it's kind of weird. It is kind of weird how that's the function is.
Well,
it only suppresses strong emotions.
yeah, sorry, you're right. I'm gapping out. Well, maybe that's the whole idea, is that it's like it doesn't suppress everything equally. It just suppresses whatever goes above a certain peak. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like when you're doing like audio, and it's like you're like, anything above this decibel threshold you need to crank down.
Yeah, but in the novel, it's every time the threshold is crossed, the emotions are cut down to 0.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah, like you said, I agree. I think it's just whatever the author kind of feels like he wants Ainz to feel at that moment. Because really, like you said, like, I mean, he talks often about sort of the anxiety that he seems to have whenever he thinks he's going to be, considered not as capable by the netizens of Nazareth. He always has that anxiety. And you're kind of like, should that not be suppressed? Because that seems pretty intense.
But that's conveniently not above the threshold.
Yeah, like a lot of times when his emotions aren't suppressed, or whenever something goes good for Nazareth that he didn't even plan, and all the NPCs are like, "Oh, Ainz-sama, how did you come up with this brilliant idea?" And he's just like flustered. He has like no clue what the hell they're talking about. So he has to like come up with stuff on the top of his head of like, "Oh yeah, well, you see, I predicted that the village would do this," and they're like, "Oh wow, you're so brilliant. Like, I should have never doubted you." Like, it never suppresses his like flustering.
I love in some of the later volumes. I think it was Nabe. She's like, "Oh, well, why didn't you do this?" Or maybe it was another character. But they're like, "Why didn't you do this?" And he's like, "Oh, I always have a plan. Don't worry. Don't question me."
Yeah, he just waves his hand. Just, it'll be obvious to you in a little while. Well, I kind of, you know what? I get the idea that that's kind of like the comedic effect, like that's, because like, let's face it, I mean, there's not a lot of comedy really in this series. Like, I have to admit, when I watched the anime, I thought, wow, it seems like there's a lot more comedy in the anime than I remember in the light novels. But really, like in the light novels, it seems more like the only comedic moments are either, yes, Ainz being flustered or the anxiety about, oh my God, they're going to find out that I'm useless, or it's Albedo and her absolute lust for Ainz.
Yeah, with her Dakimakura.
Like,
Oh yeah, how is that? How are they? Do they have those in this universe somehow?
oh, the duck.
She's
like
she's very resourceful.
Like
She
the-
can
Albert.
sue.
like the
She
fact
knows
that
us.
She wants.
the fact that something like that exists in their world makes me kind of suspect that someone else from our universe is there, and he's also an otaku, and he like kind of like a Outbreak Company, where they have a Japanese high school student go to another fantasy world and introduce them to like otaku culture.
Well,
So, like,
I think. I mean, I like you get the impression she made them
Yeah.
herself, but I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Like the guys in this guild are probably like, I mean, you know, a bunch of otaku. I mean, we know the one dude's like into hentai. Like it's really not that shocking to me that one of the NPCs would know what a hug pillow is. You know what I mean? Like. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they probably had a couple of like super ultra rare ones in the vault of like Nazareth, you know?
World items.
World class items, yeah, like hug this pillow and it'll obliterate your enemies. Yeah. So I mean it's I think the other thing that I like about Overlord, like when we're talking about this sort of first volume and not, you know, wanting to spoil anything, but I mean, we're introduced to characters in this first volume that then become a main character, at least like farther on, like in volume 7, the one character becomes like a sort of a main character in the story there. Like, I like how the world building in this one, like everything kind of comes back. Like characters aren't just introduced and then they disappear and we never hear from them again. Like they do come back to play, like Grazov. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of his name. But you know, like
Gazev?
the sorry?
Gazev?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Like how he's introduced in this first volume, and I mean, he just keeps coming back and playing like a major role, like again and again and again. Like I like how even the dude who's introduced in volume 3 that like basically pisses his pants and runs from Shaltir, like even he becomes like a bigger player later on. Like again, we're not going to go too far beyond that, but you know what I mean? Like I enjoy how like these characters are introduced, and like the dude like is it like, I always want to call him Brian, but is he
I think it's Brain.
Yeah, I was going to say
Brain.
I'm trying to remember of how it was pronounced in the anime. Was it Brain?
Oh,
I think it was
I'm pretty
Brain,
sure
yes.
it's Brain.
Yeah. So, I mean, this dude, like, and I mean, I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place in terms of volumes, but I mean, like, but he's introduced in volume 3 and he seems like a real throwaway character. Like, I'm super strong. And then, like, you know, he's, of course, proves completely useless in the face of this vampire. And you kind of, like, I kind of thought, like, as he ran away, I thought, well, we'll never see that dude again because, you know, why would we?
Oh, I think if he were a throwaway character, Shaltir would have finished him off. That's
Well, yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. But I mean, at the same time, though, this was only volume 3 of Overlord. I didn't know quite the ground rules of Overlord at that point.
even volume 2 kind of starts to, well, the end of volume 1 and in volume 2, they start to introduce some of these names that you won't hear for a while. And Brain is one of the ones that gets brought up by, I believe, Clementine. She says Brain is one of the characters that could defeat me. So, like, they start to introduce stuff. It's kind of like Dendrogram, where they kind of introduce some of the villains behind the scenes and then bring them back later. They've kind of set up, oh, there's these 6 heroes. Oh, there's this dark society that is operating in the shadows, and we only really know, like, one member. Like, they set this stuff up, and you're like, okay, well, we're going to get to see these people later, I guess.
yeah. Also, the interludes. There are in most volumes there are 1 or 2 interludes that have nothing to do at all to do with the current storyline, but it's just characters talking, and some of them haven't made any further appearance up to volume 12. So he's definitely setting up events much further in the future.
Well, is the web novel completed?
I think the web novel has been discontinued. I'm not sure because I haven't read the web novel, but apparently there are some quite heavy differences to the light novel, and I'm not sure if they could even continue the web novel with such large differences.
I think what happened was I see this with a couple of series where like it starts off as a web novel and then as the author starts writing the light novel version, since he's so busy with that, the web novel gets kind of put on hiatus and then like eventually the light novel's pretty much already almost caught up to the web novel. So there's really no point of even continuing it anymore, right?
Well, I mean, it seems to me, and now, I mean, I don't quote me on this totally, but as I understand it, like Maruyama has a day job that he still has. Like Overlord is part-time for him, as far as I understand it, even now.
Which is surprising because I think Overlord is like one of the like best-selling light novel series in Japan. So you'd think with all the royalties and everything that he'd be able to just write Overlord full time and live on a pretty good salary, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, you got to figure like he's got I mean, you've got 3 seasons of anime, 2 movies that were compilation movies of the first 2 seasons. Each volume of Overlord sells well in excess of 150,000 copies. Like, yeah, I don't really think he needs to work beyond this.
Maybe it's just a
looked
passion
it up,
or something.
and the web novel seems to stop after volume 9, but there are plenty of differences, like Enfi isn't in there, Hamske is not in there, Made doesn't exist.
Albedo isn't
So-
in it. I don't think Albedo is even in it.
No, she's not. According to the one like fact I just looked at really quick. Yeah, like there's whole major characters that are in the light novel that don't exist.
That makes
So-
the light novel already better.
Well, again, I kind of wonder if that was kind of, Albedo is an interesting character because she's kind of like, to me, she kind of represents that dichotomy of the series, right? Like, on the one hand, she seems to be this goofy girl in love, like, cuddling Ein's hug pillows and stuff. And yet she is absolutely ruthless when she's unleashed in like a battle or whatever, like,
Yeah, she's even ready to like cut down people that Ainz is like trying to help because they looked at him the wrong way.
Yeah, like in the first volume when Ein saves Enri and her sister, like Albedo's with him and like he just saved their lives, and then like since they're like terrified because they see a giant lich in front of them, they think he's like gonna like hurt them. Like they're so terrified that they're not showing Ain's respect apparently. So like Albedo's about to just slaughter them herself after Ain's just saved their lives.
well, that's it. Like, and that's what I mean. Like, this, it's she to me, like she reflects kind of how this book can go both ways, right? Like you do have sort of those comedic moments, the slightly lighthearted or absurd things, but yet there's always this really sort of violent, dark undercurrent to the whole series. Like, I mean, definitely. Oh, go ahead.
I know we're jumping around a bit, but like Brita in volume 3, like I was like really nervous for her, and then obviously it's because she met Ainz that she's kind of saved with the potion, but like. There are definitely some non-player characters and some humans in the world that you're, like, worried for when they encounter some of Ainz, these characters from Nazareth. Like, you're just really worried and, like, hoping that nothing bad will happen. Because just, like, even, temper flare, and they could take them out.
Yeah, I think that's something that makes up a lot of the tension in this series. Because the danger for the people in that land are not necessarily the villains, but the protagonists.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that Overlord has that's kind of different from a lot of isekai series is that most of the time the tension is from if the protagonists will like make it through whatever situations they're in, but they're all extremely overpowered. So like the thought of any of them actually dying is pretty minimal. So you're more worried about the like actual like humans and like normal like adventurers like getting into contact with them and like possibly getting slaughtered instead.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I remember reading volume 2 and volume 2 of course introduces the whole thing where Ainz decides that he's going to become Momon, the dark sort of knight or whatever and that he's going to adopt this sort of hero persona to investigate the world a little bit more himself. And when he joins that team in volume 2, I thought for sure, okay, these guys are going to become recurring characters. Like in any other light novel series, they would have been in the book for ages. You know what I mean? And even if one or two of them died, like still like a couple of them would survive. I was positive that was what was going to happen. And then what? Like,
Well, even one of the characters, they were like, okay, you run because you have something important to do. And then he's dead. And I'm like, what? Like, didn't he have something important to go do? And it's like, no, he's not.
For some reason, I haven't read volume 2 in a little bit, so I can't remember what that important thing is. I just remember, I think one of them was like hiding their gender. If I remember, one of them was actually a girl.
And that was the character. And the whole
I
thing.
think I know what the important thing was, but it would be spoiling for volume 6.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or 5.
Yeah. Let's just say that person had a family member that they were trying to help.
Okay.
And that it comes back later. Yeah, in fact, it really comes back later.
Just curious for future reference, are you caught completely up with the anime, Justice? Like all 3 seasons?
No, I haven't read volume 9 yet. I have.
But with the anime?
But have you watched the whole 3rd season, just in case I don't want to spoil anything?
No, I have not I have not watched the 3rd season because since Overlord is a series I really like, I did
You're
not
waiting till after volume 9.
Volume 9 for that. So I'm hoping to read it in the next couple of weeks because I want to get caught up with it. Obviously, I want to get caught up with it. But yeah, so like, yeah, I mean, that kind of blew me away though. Like that was where I kind of said to myself, like, A, I love this series because it's unpredictable, and B, like, damn, this series is unpredictable. Like, it just kind of made me think, like, okay, the gloves are off. Like, who knows where this series is going to go, right?
Yep. Technically, I like unpredictable, but in this case, it's not that the story is unpredictable, but the characters are unpredictable. So, in the first few novels, Ainz and his NPCs are mostly up against evil people. In the first volume, it's the Sunlight Scripture. In the second novel, it's Clementine and whatever the necromancer was called. But later on, sometimes you are rooting for the people they're fighting against, rather than Ainz and his guys.
And I think that goes back to how Ainz, at the beginning of the series in Volume 1, you still can see that he is like a good-natured guy that's just putting on an act for the NPCs. But as the series gradually goes on, the status of him being a lich is like tainting his like sanity, and it's turning him a lot more sinister than what he started off as.
Yeah, but he's flipping back and forth between those extremes a few times in the later volumes. That's a bit of a shame that we can't talk about those. But if we're ever doing a sequel to that, that's something I've got lots to talk about.
Yeah,
I've only read up to volume 3.
Same.
Well, we do want to. Yeah, the Flyz is right. Like we gotta keep it. We gotta limit ourselves because otherwise we could probably go on for 5-6 hours or more. But you know what though, like I said, like you know, even in the first 3 volumes, you do see that flip flopping. Like, I mean, volume 3, like again, you know, so like volume 2, I mean, like I said, first off, it's like, okay, this team of adventurers, I like these characters. They're good characters. Ainz even seems to think that they're, you know, pretty good, that like he could probably hang out with them for a bit. Boom, they're all friggin' dead. Like, I was like, okay, now I don't know what's going on, because every other light novel that I have read, at least half this team would have survived. And then when Ainz takes out Clementine, that's where I was like, okay, this guy, man, you just can't cross him, because damn, like, just crushes her to death. Like,
Yeah, the bad thing about the death of that adventuring party is that it's not to make Ainz hate Clementine. It's in the novel to make the reader hate Clementine. Because Ainz doesn't hate Clementine because his emotions get suppressed in this case.
yeah.
So the only
but-
effect or the only goal the author has in killing of this party is to make the reader hate Clementine. Oder Clementina.
Ainz says that he suppressed his emotions and that he didn't care, and he says that. I think he says that to Clementine, if I remember right.
He says to Clementine that he's annoyed that she interfered with his plans to make those adventurers spread his reputation.
Okay, yes, so that was more of why he wanted
Yeah.
to ultimately like annihilate her.
Yeah, she crossed his plans, but it's not that he was mad about her killing the adventurers.
Oh, I was just gonna say he could have easily just killed Clementine like real quickly, but like the way he killed her was like a like way more painful and slow death. So that like when I first read the end of volume 2, when he kills her, like that's when I realized like this guy really is an insane person, because like no like I'm sure he doesn't get joy out of killing people, but like the way he does it is really messed up. Like even if she is an evil character.
Well, and that's, and like, yeah, exactly. And I think that's where, you know, in particular, like, yeah, volume 1, I mean, you know, yeah, you get that, you do get that sort of impression where he's kind of like, I don't really care about these villagers. Maybe I should save them because it might be useful to me down the road. You know, like you get that little bit, but man, volume 2, like you said, Mirage, like he's like, yeah, Clementine, you screwed up my plans. So now you're going to suffer. Like, I'm not just going to kill you. I want you to be afraid. I want you to feel the pain. Like, you know, like it's torture. He's basically torturing her to death. Like the fact that he allows her to like stab him and everything else just to prove to her that it's useless. Like
I'm not even sure it's that because the reason he drew out the duel was because he wanted to learn about fighting techniques from her, and I think the reason he crushed her to death was because it was simply the easiest way for him to beat her, because without using magic, because she was too quick for him to hit her with his swords.
Could be, yeah. I mean, you know, yeah. I think to me,
he said he wanted to give her a handicap, so he didn't use his magic. And she avoided his swords, so he lured her in close and crushed her to death. So just efficient.
well, I guess that's certainly a way to look at it, and you're probably right. I guess though, like when I read it, that was my feeling on it, was just that it was like, this is way more vicious than it needs to be. But that, again, like that was just like, and it sounds like Flyz kind of felt a little bit the same way I did. That I was like, this is just giving me a glimpse into what this guy can become at that point.
Yeah. A small glimpse.
Yeah. And then you get the volume 3 and it's like, volume 3, I mean, like, you know, of course, like the bulk of volume 3 is basically him fighting Shaltir. And and Shaltir slaughtering a whole lot of people too. But
I like the setup for volume 3 because like the end of volume 2 just ends on a cliffhanger because he just got finished fighting Clementine and he's ready to go back to Nazareth, and then he gets a message. He's like, "Oh yeah, and Ainz, Shaltyr's a traitor now," and he just sits there and he's like, "Huh?" And then the book just ends.
Yeah.
So like I think the cliffhanger is pretty funny.
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be like a joke or something. I thought it was gonna open up with her like, Shaltyr's a traitor or something. She wants to like take you instead of me taking you.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was just some kind of back and forth thing. And of course we see it's a lot more serious than that.
I think some people would have complained about a cliffhanger like that.
Well, but I mean, too, like that's where, like Mirage was saying, in the first volume, you get those hints that you've got perhaps these other previous players, and then, this whole thing with Shaltyr in volume 3, they use what do they call like a world item or whatever, right? To basically turn her. And again, like that's another big sort of drop that either this world has major items that are just like what you would have found in Yggdrasil, the game, or again, there could be other players. And I like how they kind of tease that along for a while, that, this is why Ainz operates slowly and from the shadows, is because they keep bringing up this whole specter of, are there other players? What kind of items do they have? And then, of course, yeah, with this whole thing with Shaltyr, he's like, well, here's one of my most powerful NPCs, and she got completely overwritten and could have taken me out. Like, so
That's
now we've
something
got to be careful.
Yeah, that's something I found kind of annoying when I read it the first time, because yes, from Ain's perspective, it's okay to be cautious, but from the perspective of the reader, we know that it was just normal humans of that world who used that item, and still Ainz is going on and taking precautions against every little, every conceivable event. And one or two times it's okay, but not to the extent that it's repeated in the novel.
I can see where you're coming from. I mean, but on the flip side, though, I think it's a little more realistic that obviously Ainz has no idea what the reader knows. And so he's operating in the dark. Like, he doesn't know what happened to Shaltyr, and he doesn't know that it was humans just that had normal humans that had an item and stuff like that. But
it's not only then, but also later on in the series when Shaltyr is back.
Right. Yeah.
Plus, I'm pretty sure the book tells us that Shaltyr is the most powerful NPC in all of Nazareth, and that like even Ainz describes her as someone who, if she somehow turned on him, could possibly kill him.
No, she isn't, but she's the most powerful that has been introduced in the first 3 volumes.
Well, that was some spoiler territory there.
And some are pretty situational in their power.
Yes. Yeah.
But she is supposed to be sort of Ainz's like kryptonite or something, right? Like she's supposed to be a match for him.
Yeah, she has
supposedly.
some anti-undead skills.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, you get to volume 3, and like volume 3 was the same thing. I mean, okay, like first of all, volume 3 just has like one epic ass whooping battle, which was really cool. I liked that. But the whole thing where like that adventurer party is like, yeah, we're going to ride out with you. And he's like, you really shouldn't, because it might be the death of you. And they're like, no. we're going to come. And he's like, well, okay. And then like he friggin' kills them all. And he's like, I told you. Like that was the point where I was like, okay, I see, I'm starting to see the future of this series right now.
But in this case, he had a valid reason to kill them. It would have been bad for him to have any witnesses.
Oh yeah,
this
absolutely.
Battle.
But I mean, again, like,
and you have read later volumes, and he doesn't always have such a reason.
Well, yeah, true enough. I mean, you're right. Like, absolutely. I mean, it isn't like it isn't like he is brutal or a killer just for the sake of being brutal or a killer. Like there does
Not in
seem
the
to
first
be
3 volumes.
Yeah, in the first 3 volumes. Yeah, we're talking first 3 volumes. You know, there definitely seems to be like a method to the whole thing, but you know, at the same time though, I think it was for me it was like the callousness that he did it with. You know, it was just like, well, I can't have any witnesses, so bye-bye. Like and I mean, again, like I find it funny that, you know, he talks about the suppression of his emotions and stuff, about stuff like, you know, stuff that just doesn't seem that consequential. And yet he doesn't even flicker to kill like how many guys. He doesn't say like, oh, maybe I would have felt guilty about that, but I guess it's suppressing. He's just like, yeah, they're gone because they shouldn't have come along. I mean, I guess I can say that. He warned them.
It's just the results of side characters sticking their nose in where they don't belong.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, yeah, so I mean, definitely like these first 3 volumes, I mean, there's lots of world building in them. You know, and again, like we were talking about how there's all these characters that are either mentioned or they come in sort of like a minor fashion and they come back in a much bigger fashion later on.
Yeah, I think Renna is introduced in volume 3. The princess,
Sorry, which one?
The princess, Renna.
Oh, yes. Oh, God, yeah.
She appears for the first time.
Is she? Wait, I forget. Was she actually present or was she just mentioned?
No, she's actually present. She's in a short interlude scene with Gazev and Climb is the name of the other one. Yes, Climb.
Yeah, Climb.
Yes, some of these names are very creative.
Yeah.
Well, you know, he's trying to climb the social ladder, like.
Yeah.
I guess.
But yeah, Renna is also a character we can't talk about here.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
man.
I think the only one of the major things I think they mention with her is, I think it was the princess that set up like a road network. Like she started setting up a road network.
yeah,
And they were like, no, we don't want any foreign invaders. So they were like, all right, we got to cut it off here.
yeah. Renna is one of the characters that I'm not quite sure if the author had her concept quite complete in his head when he started mentioning her in volume 3, because what we learn about her in volume 3 doesn't really match up with what we learn about her later. Because in volume 3, what we know, she's very bright and she has instituted all kinds of reforms, making life easier for the peasants and for the adventurers and so on. And I'm not quite sure if the author radically changed her character later on or if I just don't get her.
Well, but I think
Both are possibilities.
Well, I mean, but we do get I mean, granted, we're stepping a little bit outside of volumes 1 and 2 and 3, but the point that you bring up, like, I think she is a character that sort of reflects, again, a bit of the whole idea of this series, that whole, you know, there's the face that you see and then there's the real face, you know, like we do find out, like, I mean, and like later on volumes, she has enacted things that are progressive and making the world a better place. And everybody thinks that she's this, that, and the next thing. It's just, they don't know what's going on inside. And we'll leave it at that because we said not to spoil the, but I do think that whole duality is like, you know, a theme that comes back in the series. I mean, I don't think for certainly in the beginning, like in these first 3 volumes, I thought that was going to be really heavily explored in terms of Ainz himself, in terms of his duality of, you know, humanity and the undead lich. But that seems to decrease as the series goes on. Like even over the first 3 books, I think that decreased a bit.
It's hard to say. I think the duality is there all the time. It gets stronger and weaker, and like I said, his personality flip-flops between unscrupulous but and benevolent, let's say.
Now, do you think, again, like the same thing with the suppression of his emotions, do you think that is it just the author's whim, or do you think there's an actual sort of, like, do you see a pattern? I'm not asking you to spoil anything, obviously, but, you know, you've read more than us. So do you think there's a pattern to it, or is it just really however the author feels like?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen any pattern. If anything, the later volumes, they're switching between one dark, one light, one dark, one light. It's you know, volume 7 is quite dark. Volume 8 is the short stories volume.
Yes.
That's more silly stories.
Yeah,
Volume
it's certainly
9 gets
lighter
dark
than volume
again.
7, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it swings back and forth.
Terrence, did you have anything in your notes you wanted to add?
Yeah, so just the beginning of volume 3, we touched on it a little bit, but like the way it starts is, again, he's got some of his allies out there trying to do a little bit of reconnaissance and also try to find like powerful people. And so one of the things is they try to take on this like mercenary onto their team who's going to kind of try to trick them, but they're the ones playing them. And I don't know, just the whole setup and even like the artwork, it was kind of like a horror story almost. The way these characters
You mean
came
the scene
in
with
and
Solution?
then
Solution.
yes, the scene with Solution. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it was like this ecchi horror scene, like this guy thinking, oh, I got away. Oh, maybe I could get away with her, and then this weird scene between them, and then obviously it's like, oh, this is outright horror. I'm gonna, he ends up basically getting sucked into her, and then you continue on, and I feel like the Shaltier half was a little almost Mission Impossible, the way she had like a goal, she had something she wanted to do, to take out, that mercenary crew, to do something good for Ainz, and then obviously everything goes to hell. And so it's a little like that kind of Mission Impossible, oh crap, I messed up, now the whole mission's gone to hell. She tries to kind of find something to do to help again, and then obviously she gets caught.
Yeah.
I just read this scene today, a bit earlier, and it's really quite lively in the woods at that night. First, the bandit camp where Brain was camped out, and she's just finished with that when a party of adventurers comes in. When she's wiped them out, she runs into that other party, which I'm not spoiling who it is.
Oh yeah.
And all of them are out in the woods on that night.
Yeah, and even she messes up with the thing with that party because she realizes Brita somehow knows Ainz, and she's like, I don't really know if she's somebody I should be protecting, if she's somebody I should kill, and she's just like, I don't know, I'm just going to let it go. Yeah. And then they find, I guess, that mercenary troop had some woman that they had tied down, and she's like, I don't know what to do with them. I just let it go. And so she already knows she's messed up in so many ways and kind of given herself away. And then she's like, all right, I got one more hope. And then her hopes are dashed when she's just like captured, basically.
Yeah. I still don't know why Britta survived. She's one of those characters who could have died because she's not really that important to the story, but she did.
Well, she shows up and then she just keeps showing up.
She keeps showing up, but still not in a very important role. So
no.
Burrito's the adventurer who
The one who got
Ainz
the
gives
potion
the
from,
potion,
from
right?
Momon.
Yeah, I
Yes.
don't remember. Like, I've only read the first 3 volumes of the novels, but even in the anime, 3 seasons in, she really hasn't done like anything important.
No.
Yeah.
Well, no, she
She
hasn't
shows
at
up
all.
later, but she doesn't really do anything.
Again, and you know what? And isn't that the funny thing about this is like you think about some of the
Unpredictable.
characters. Well, yeah, again, right? Like you think about some of the characters that have survived, and you're like, you're useless, and yet you're still alive, and yet there's other characters that you were like, I really like this character, and I think this character could be really interesting. Dead. Like, and I mean, honestly, like, it's not even a spoiler to say that continues, like, for the entire series that I've read so far. Like, you know, like, it's not, you know, this is not limited to just a couple books or, you know, every once in a while. Like, it's an ongoing thing.
Well, if we can touch on it a little bit, the characters that die at the end of Volume 2, Clementine and that mage, like, they both die, and then their bodies disappear. And obviously, I assume this will come back up later, but I don't know. And it seems like there's probably a way to revive them. You know, just as Ainz can revive, you know, Shaltir at the end of Volume 3, it seems like those characters from the end of Volume 2 are either have been revived or will be revived. And you wonder if, you know, when are they going to come back into the plot?
Well, didn't Ainz have to sacrifice a hell of a lot to get Shaltir revived?
Yeah, but Charlty
Yes.
is level 100, so the cost is especially high. And also, she is using a spell, so she doesn't lose any experience while being resurrected. Other people can get resurrected, but with the spells that they have available, they will lose a lot of experience.
We don't really know in this world how resurrection, we don't know if it will function. I mean, obviously we know on Ainz' side that it functions the same way, but do we know if there might be other Tyre spells or something on the human side in this world? Like, we just don't know, I think, fully, like, what they're capable of. So there might be other ways to revive them. I don't know.
Well, not like you don't find out in these volumes, but there is stuff later on.
Okay.
So yeah, again, not to.
Yeah,
spoil.
I think Ainz says something like that in Volume 3 when he revives Shaltir, that there are lower tier spells to revive someone, but that works only by sacrificing experience points or parts of the soul or something like that.
Yeah, there are limitations to it.
So people who are just complete novices or level 1 characters can't be revived that way because their soul is not strong enough.
Yeah, there's definitely, I know there's limitations. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with even the magic system in this whole thing is, you know, I do appreciate the whole tier level and the different limitations depending on what you're capable of. And then, of course, you know, it's just the joke that Ainz is basically God tier. You know what? Like, I definitely, like, there's a part of me with this series that I don't want Ainz just to go wholesale evil, just let it loose. But at the same time, there is a small part of me that would like to see that happen.
Well, I guess the end goal is basically Ainz, at least for now, it seems like the end goal would be him getting full control of their entire land somehow or other. You know, obviously first through his deeds. And then once he gets control, then you wonder, you know, what's going to happen then? Like, what does he want to have happen? How does he want that society to run? Is it going to be like an oppressive rule? Is it going to be, you know, helpful rule? I don't know.
Well, I think you get the impression even in these first 3 volumes that, like, you know, his immediate goal is to try and find ways to see how this world functions in ways that are similar to Yggdrasil and how it is different from Yggdrasil. So like, can you, does the money from Yggdrasil work in this world the same way? Like, and it does, if I need money in this world, like that's part of the reason that he becomes, Momon, the adventurer, right? Is that, so that he can gain not just the fame and the intelligence because of that, but also money, right? To have currency, and riches and access to like rare items and stuff like that to see what functions in a similar way and whether he can use the same spells and stuff like that in this world that he used in Yggdrasil. And you know what, it's like definitely again, like, a couple of us have either read ahead or because of the anime know a bit more about what happens. But yeah, definitely like in the first 3 volumes, the goal starts to be about, making Nazarick stronger, getting the tools that Nazarick will need, that should Nazarick be either A, discovered, or B, decide to make its presence known, that it's prepared to handle that regardless of what kind of opposition they face. So, yeah. So, I mean, just for any listeners that maybe have seen the anime or, have read just the first couple volumes or whatever, there are 3 seasons of Overlord, 3 different cours, and each one covers 3 volumes. So it's pretty easy. It's not like a lot of anime that are based on light novels where they do different numbers of volumes every season. This one seems to be pretty consistent. It's been 3 volumes every season so far. So if you've seen all 3 seasons of Overlord, you know the contents of the 9 books, the first 9 books.
Though if it does get a 4th season, I don't know how they're gonna handle that, because I'm pretty sure, isn't the volumes 12 and 13 like a 2-part arc? So then they'd have to adopt volumes 10, 11, 12,
will either
13.
be 10 through 13, or it will only be 10 and 11. But I think it will probably be 10 through 13.
Yeah, I can't see them just doing 10 and 11. Not when, like, I mean, let's face it, anime is more likely to compress more volumes than they are to stretch out just a few volumes. Unless they think that this series is the cash cow that, let's face it, it pretty much has proven it is. And they figure they're going to announce 2 cours right away, and they decide to break it up that way. So who knows? But at least, if you're listening to the podcast and you've seen the anime, all that they have up to this date, that is the first 9 volumes. And then, we'll see what happens. Currently in English, we have the first 9 volumes. Volume 10 should be coming out probably in the next 2 months or so.
I'm looking forward to volume 10 in the anime, because it's one of my favorite volumes so far.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't read, I've only read volumes up to 8. I need to get 9 read, but, so, okay, well, 10 is something to look forward to. Cool. That's good to know. There you go, readers, listeners, get working, because that is one thing that I will say about Overlord that I have really enjoyed, is that the series is fairly consistent. Like, if you like, I mean, definitely, some volumes are better than others, but still, like, there is a pretty consistent quality, I'd say, to the books.
Yeah, you can say that.
Like, having read, having read 8 volumes, I mean, like, the volumes 5 and 6, I thought were phenomenal. I thought they were excellent. And again, like,
the writing is consistently good. The tone is very fluctuating. Yes,
I agree. Yeah, like you said, I mean, you certainly get moments that, I mean, again, like Albedo, like I said, like taking a look at her as a character, I mean, at one point she just seems like this very stoic, dark mistress, and then the next second it's like she's rolling around in Ainz's bed, like with a hug pillow, and you're just like, what the hell is happening? Like,
Well, that's kind of all Ainz' fault in the first place, since
Well,
he kind of messed with her settings
Yes.
just before he got isekai'd.
well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, absolutely, but I just, like, I just, to me, like, I find sometimes, like, as much as I love the series, I really do, and as much as I think overall the volumes are really good, you get those little moments, like with the whole, like, Shaltir and Albedo, like, your typical harem girls fighting over the dude they're in love with, and you're just kind of like, I just all of a sudden I don't feel like I'm reading the same series anymore.
Yeah, but you get those in many anime or light novels, that the comic relief segments are pretty much normal.
Oh yeah,
Even
I
in
don't.
otherwise serious.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why, like, Albedo is there. Like, I mean, knowing that she wasn't in the web novel, I think that's part of the reason that she's been introduced, is to give us that, bit of-
Albedo was, I think Albedo was in the web novel.
No, it says she wasn't.
According to the wiki, which
I think her
is
sister
pretty
wasn't.
well updated.
Let me see.
Now I'm gonna have to.
I thought I saw that she
'cause
was
I'm-
not in it. I'll just double check. Although I have not list of characters that do not exist.
Okay,
in
yeah,
the,
okay,
yeah.
you're right.
So yeah, so I think that's
Yeah.
again, like, I think that she is been introduced to be that bit of comic relief, because I don't know. I mean, again, having not read the web novel, I can't compare the two. I don't know whether maybe the web novel, you do sometimes get the impression when authors go from writing a web novel to writing the light novel, I sometimes wonder how much of that is the author kind of editing themselves, and how much is that the editor or the publisher kind of going, you know what, we need a little more fan service. Or
If I read through the lists of the characters that are not in the web novel, I question how good the web novel really can be with so many characters. There are so many strong characters that give the series their tone and the flair that are all missing from the web novel. I haven't gone through the list of the changes completely, but if Albedo, Mare, Hamske, and all of them are not in the web novel,
yeah. And yet you
the
read
cast is almost cut by a third or something like that.
yeah, like, well, but I mean, again, right? Like, Hamuske, again, like, I mean, you talk about
Yeah, Hamske is definitely comic relief.
yes, oh yes, the great
Those eyes. Oh, those eyes. So wise.
Oh God.
oh my god, like when he's talking about how embarrassed he is riding Hamuske.
And everybody around him is just, it's so in awe. And
Yes.
so awestruck.
But apparently the
this
penguin is in the
hamster.
web novel.
Oh, how noble a beast that this is. Like, oh my god.
Because that's also definitely comic relief, the penguin.
Oh yeah, like, yeah.
Oh, can I ask for a spoiler? Does he get a saddle for Hamsuke?
Yes.
Okay.
I just find it funny because in that universe, Hamsuke is described as like this like very like legendary beast, and then Ainz, since he knows exactly what it is, he's like, oh geez, I'm riding a friggin' giant hamster, and he's like super embarrassed about it. Like he's like, I must look like the most uncool person ever doing this. But like everyone else is like amazed.
I know. Like, and again, you know what? Like, some of the stuff, and like I said, like, some of the harem antic-ish type stuff, that's the kind of stuff that I would say when I was reading the light novel, I kind of was like, this kind of took me a little bit out of it. But I got to admit, man, Hamsuke, I was just like, yeah, I'm into this. This is great. Like, I honestly laughed at, and I was like, I'm so glad this character is in this book. Because there's just something about, like, this giant hamster with a snake tail.
Yeah, I feel like half the time too, he rides in on him and he's like, "All right, Hamsuke, you go run like 50 miles that way. We're gonna go to our battle."
Well, yeah, if I recall, like that's what happens in Volume 2, right? He leaves Hamsuke. Oh no, he does take Hamsuke like over the gate, right? But
Yes,
then he
yes.
leaves him to kind of like he's like, yeah, go deal with those skeletons and crap.
No, he has Nabella carry him,
That's
so he doesn't get
Oh yeah, volume 3.
Yes.
volume 2.
No, Volume 2.
Volume
Yeah,
2.
she's flying through the air with
She
him.
carries
like,
him in the air.
Yes. That was like the best in the anime. Like, there's, you know what? Like, I will admit, like, I generally like novels better than movies, anime, but that is one scene that I was like, man, I love seeing this animated right now. Like, oh man. Now you know what? I will say that I got the impression, like just talking about the anime briefly, I kind of thought like the anime was a pretty good adaptation overall. Like it didn't seem like it cut out that much that was important.
No, it's pretty complete.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I think it just. I only watched a little bit of it, but it seemed like it just kind of cuts out some more of the backstory stuff and like, some of the guildmate stuff. It cuts out, like when he's thinking about that stuff. But I don't know if it comes up later.
Yeah, it's always hard to do all of the interior monologue from a light novel in an anime. And to be honest, all the stuff about the other guildmates is stuff I read and almost immediately forgot again.
Yeah, it's just superfluous for a lot of stuff.
I think anime viewers have less a problem with how well it adapts the material. And I think it's just more the production values of the show than the actual adaptating.
Yeah, but the first 2 seasons were not that bad in that regard. The third season had a bit much CGI for my tastes, but tastes vary.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna mention exactly what it is because it's stuff from Volume 9 that Justice hasn't read, but like the whole big battle in Volume 9, like light novel readers described it as like really badass and epic or whatever, and then like you see the monsters in the anime and it's like this looks really, really weird in CGI, and like it loses a lot of the impact that I'm sure the novel had.
Well, the monsters were really weird in the light novel as well, but they looked kind of freaky in the CGI.
But my favorite part in season 3 though is just watching bad CGI attacking other bad CGI. Where like there's a Justice you read in Volume 8. There's like the battle between like goblins and like human soldiers, and like in the 3rd season, it's literally like really ugly CGI goblins running at really ugly CGI soldiers, and they like kind of just bounce right off each other and looks super. It's really hilarious.
Oh, well, CGI and anime still have a ways to go with each other, I think.
I think some shows that are only CGI are not that bad. It's only when they are 2D and CGI in combination that things go south.
Yeah.
Except maybe Berserk.
I haven't seen that.
Well, Berserk.
We'll leave Berserk alone, I think. All right, cool. Well, you know what? I mean, we've been going for about 2 hours now, and so I know it's late where Mirage is. I think it's pushing towards 2:30 in the morning where you are right now?
Yeah.
So I think we will leave it at that for tonight. So, because of course, as we have hinted at pretty thoroughly, there is a lot more to talk about in Overlord. In fact, I wouldn't even say the story really gets going until you get beyond these 3 volumes. Like these 3 volumes really are just introducing a whole lot of stuff, and the ball really gets rolling like in
volume 5. I think,
volume
yes.
5 in particular. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You get a little bit in volume 4, but definitely volume 5 is where this one kind of
I
hits
think
the ground.
more or less you could skip volume 4. It doesn't do very much for the
Oh, you
story.
can't do that.
It's not bad, but it doesn't do really much for the story.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that for another podcast. In any case, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. Mirage, thanks for coming in. It was great having a little bit of additional insights on this one.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm sure we'll put you to use some other time. All right, and to you, the listeners, thank you so much for joining us. I believe we agreed our next podcast is going to be Konosuba, if I recall. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So the next podcast we are going to be talking about Konosuba. We're going to go from a slightly darker series to an absolutely absurdly funny series. And we'll be talking about the first 4 volumes of that one, because that is what the anime covered. So that'll be our next episode. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye for now. For show notes and related links, visit lightnovelpodcast.com.